Welcome to the Business Performance Podcast, where we feature expert thought leaders and cover their best strategies, stories, and advice that you can use to successfully mature your own business performance. Now, here is your host, business coach, Henry Schneider. Hello, everyone. This is Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast, and today it's my pleasure to be talking to Maura Nevel Thomas, who is been involved with speaking and coaching and mentoring for quite some time. She has her own company called Regain Your Time. She's a certified speaking professional. So, Maura, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Henry.
Okay, so to begin with, could you briefly describe Regain Your Time and the type of customers you work with and the types of services you provide?
Absolutely. I offer speaking and training services mostly to organizations whose teams need help with managing all of the details of their busy lives. Companies come to me when their team is working too hard, when their culture is getting a little bit too demanding, when the pace has sped up at an organization and people are struggling with the volume of emails, the amount of meetings that they have, all of the responsibilities that they're juggling, and the companies want to both make their lives easier for their employees and also ramp up their success.
Okay. All right. So looking at your screen, you've got your book up there, Attention Management. So could you spend a few moments telling our audience the difference between attention management and time management?
Absolutely. I believe that time management is the path that we use to improve our productivity. So when people think, I need to get more done in my day, I need to be more productive, I must need better time management. But I have three problems with the idea of time management. The first is that the phrase itself gives us the impression that we have some control over time. Time is not really a thing we can manage. Time marches on. You can't back it up. You can't slow it down. You can't bend it to your will in any way. And so the phrase itself is deceiving and I think holds us back. Second reason that I have a problem with the idea of time management is because when I ask people, what does that mean to you? What do you do to actually manage your time? The most common response I get is, well, I make appointments with myself on my calendar. And the problem with that is that I find that people who do that end up spending more time rearranging their calendar than they do actually getting things done, because the first person we break an appointment with is ourselves, right? And so it's like, okay, I'll do that thing at 11. Oh, it's 11:30. Okay, I'll do it at 1. Oh, shoot, it's 2. Okay, I'll do it at 4. Okay, I'll do it tomorrow at 9, right? And you just keep dragging and dragging and dragging. So that doesn't really, making an appointment with yourself isn't really that helpful. And then even if you do, the third problem with time management is that even if you do decide, okay, it's 9 o'clock, I said I was going to write that report at 9 o'clock and it's 9 o'clock, so here I go. You call up the report and you start to think about the report. And then, oh, look, there's an email. Who's that from? Okay, no, I'll get that later. Okay, now the report, where was I? And, oh, text message, hang on, let me just get, oh, no, where was I? Back to the report, right? And if the time that you set aside, the time that you managed to do the report goes by like that, with you switching your attention every few minutes, then you will have a very different experience than the one that you intended at the end of that time you set aside. That report won't be done. And you'll have to review it and you'll have to do it over again. And so how you actually manage your time only matters if you also managed your attention. And so I believe that a much more relevant path to productivity today is attention management rather than time management.
Okay, and that brings up a couple of things in my mind. One is, it may be because the age is affecting me now, but a lot of times I'll start working and I get distracted, then I don't remember at all what I was working on. And then I have to go back and retrace my steps. Why did I open that browser? Oh, now I know what I was looking for, Beck. So how do you get over that sort of thing?
Absolutely, it's very common. we have so many things going on all the time, and we're switching our attention among so many different things that you can't keep them all in your head. Your brain can only hold about, it used to be about 7 things that you could switch between 7 things at a time, but now it's more like 3, maybe 4.
Well, the other thing too I'm thinking about is, Outlook has got this new productivity feature where it'll block out focus time every day in your calendar, and it adjusts it depending upon what you got there. But I don't know. What is your opinion of that? Does that actually work or not?
My clients are reporting that they are finding it helpful, at least as a reminder, so that even most of my clients just book right over it and just sort of ignore it. And, oh, I'm too busy for that. And I have to take this meeting, or I have to talk to that person. And so it's the same problem with time management, right? Putting it on your calendar doesn't mean it's going to get done.
Right.
But having it put there at least makes them go, oh, yeah, I probably should have taken some focus time and I didn't. So at least there's that. Yeah. So it could be helpful for sure.
Yeah, and then they also send out a weekly summary about how well you've focused on that focus time. But again, if you're letting things interfere, it doesn't really help.
Well, and my problem with computer tools that tell you how productive you were, I mean, to me, the most productive things and often the most important things happen away from the computer in a way that Outlook can't measure it. It's the thinking time, and it's the deep work, and the creativity and the ideas, which the computer can't measure.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing that happens too is that you work all day long, and then you say, well, what did I do this morning? How did I spend my time over this course of the day? I can go back to my calendar. I can see what meetings I had. What did I do between the meetings?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. It's a real problem.
Okay, so I always ask my guests about quality, and quality is a very broad term. It always sounds good, but it's vague. So what does quality mean to you and to your clients?
Well, it depends on the context. So the quality of their work, the quality of the service they provide to their clients, the quality, it could be the quality of the work that gets done inside the organization. It's as you said, it's pretty broad.
Yeah. So what about for you? What when your clients come to you, what do they expect? What do they think in terms of the quality of what you provide? How do you define that?
One of the ways that I differentiate myself is that I really view myself as a partner with my client to make sure that they get the outcomes that they expect. And so I don't work with every client who comes to me, because I need to know that I can deliver the results that they expect. And sometimes, I'll have clients who say to me, oh my gosh, our turnover is so high and our people are burning out and we're losing a lot of good people because of it. And, we have all these meetings all day and we have these real problems. So can you come in for like 45 minutes and do like a lunch and learn for us and fix that? No, I'm sorry. The leaders have to be committed to making the changes necessary. And oftentimes the biggest impediment to the team's productivity is the behavior of the leaders and the culture of the organization. And so we might have to dig deep to find out what the real problems are. And so if the client isn't willing to partner with me, then I can't deliver quality results. And so that's how I define the quality of my work.
Okay, so the other term that's always interesting and it's kind of vague is productivity. How do you define productivity?
Well, that's super easy because it's what I base my work on. So there is a very specific definition in the dictionary that guides my work. The full definition is of the word productive is achieving or producing a significant amount or result. So achieving or producing a significant amount. So if you take out the producing an amount piece, because I don't help people make more widgets in their factory, right? I help people with personal productivity. So if you take that piece out, what you're left with is what I consider to be the personal productivity piece, achieving a significant result. So how productive you are in a given time frame is how much progress you have made on the results that are most significant to you. And each of us gets to decide for ourselves what our most significant results are for the day.
Okay. So then you have to do some planning and activities, and you're going to say, these are all the things I want to get done, and then you're going to measure your progress towards getting all that stuff done. That gives you your measure of productivity.
Well, I teach a comprehensive workflow management process so that it helps people get control of all of the details on their plate. Your significant changes with your time horizon. So what's significant in this hour is probably significant from what will be significant for the day when you look back on it, which will be significant for the week, for the year, for the lifetime, right? So the significance changes with the time horizon. But yes, it's if you have your work all organized and centralized in a way that makes it actionable and prioritized, then you know at any moment what is the best use of my time and attention right now.
Okay. All right. So, Maura, what are one or two of the biggest myths or misconceptions out there when it comes to business performance and productivity and management of your attention or time?
Some of the biggest misconceptions. Well, one of them relates back to what I mentioned, which is that productivity, if the team isn't being productive, that the team needs the skills to be productive. Sometimes that's true. And also, the culture of the company is what is undermining the team's productivity. So, for example, I know this idea of, well, when we're all back in the office again, there's this idea of management by walking around.
Yeah.
If you're the boss, which is great, I understand being accessible to your team, that is important. But if you're the one sort of roaming around the office, then your team is always going to drop everything every time you appear. And you don't know what they were working on. If they had a lot of what I call brain power momentum built up, right? If they were deep in a task, and then you walk in, hey, do you have a minute? Well, they're gonna, right, whatever brain power momentum they have built up is now poof, it's gone.
Yeah.
And so the leaders sometimes are the biggest interrupter that is undermining their people's attention. That's one of many different examples, but that's a misconception, is that productivity is the team's problem, but the culture and the behavior of the leaders have a huge impact on the team's productivity.
All right. Well, any other misconceptions?
Yes. Another misconception I think people have is that responding immediately to emails equals good customer service. And I understand the desire to be responsive, but I also think that has to be balanced with the with the need to have the opportunity to build up that brain power momentum so that people can apply themselves fully and really unleash that brain power that they got hired for to begin with, because they can't share their wisdom and experience in 2-minute increments in between checking every new email that just arrived.
Yeah.
So that's another misconception.
Yeah, the other thing that goes along with that is that if you react immediately as it comes in, you're going to be shooting your mouth off potentially, and didn't take enough time to really consider your response and how it may be received on the other end.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so what's the biggest challenge that you face when you try to work with your clients?
Well, like I said, I try to eliminate this on the front end, but if the leaders of the department, the leaders of the team, or the leaders of the organization, depending on who I'm working with, aren't willing to make the commitment to partner with me to really solve the problems that they want the training to address, then the training is unlikely to be successful. And usually that is a client that I will decline. or I will help them to understand if they're open to it. But usually organizational productivity can't be fixed solely from the outside. You have to look within.
Okay. All right. So when you do find a client that you're willing to work with, what are some of the common fears that they have coming in to talk with you and how do you make them overcome those fears?
Well, I'm not sure I would say fears necessarily. I'm not sure if there are any fears really. I think it's really just important to make sure that we're on the same page and that we've identified the issues to be addressed. It's important to make sure that the team understands, what they're being asked to participate in, and that they feel that it's going to be useful. So as much as leadership buy-in is important, participant buy-in is equally as important. So we want to make sure that we address that. But I'm not sure I can think of anything that they're afraid of necessarily.
All right. So are there any perceived obstacles that you have to overcome when you're working with the clients? I mean, you don't have the obstacles, but they've got these perceived obstacles.
Sure. Well, one obstacle is that buying training, which is primarily what I do. I do mostly training. I do some speaking, but even my speaking is a lot for corporate stuff. But one of the obstacles is that they are unclear on the needs of the team. And so when we talk about, what do you think the team's challenges are? Because sometimes I get called in for things like, oh, the quality isn't high enough, or we need everybody to take on more clients, but they're saying that they can't, but I really think they can. And so sometimes we have to uncover, what are the team's challenges so that we can customize the program appropriately.
Okay. Yeah. So what you've got this gap between what the senior manager thinks the problem is and what's actually occurring down below. You have to kind of bridge that chasm.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So could you please share a story of how you helped the client overcome those obstacles and become successful?
Yes. I'm not sure if it's the obstacle I just described, the first story that comes to mind, but when my clients bring me in, one of the outcomes is that we create a common language to talk about how work gets done inside the organization. And when people understand how to describe their priorities, how to describe their workload, how to describe how all the departments interact with each other, and everybody is using the same language, and also everybody is using the same habits, things like, if we're going to have a meeting, what's the goal of the meeting? What agenda items are we going to talk about in the meeting? How long are we going to allocate on the agenda to each of these items? What's my role? Why are you inviting me to the meeting? And so when they start to use that language, everybody is on the same page. Or when they start to talk about attention management, I'm going to close my door for a little bit because I need to manage my attention. Everybody goes, oh, I understand where you're coming from. So that common language really gets everyone on the same page and working together to support each other rather than to drag people back to their old habits.
Okay. So if you could distill that down into 25 words or less, what would be the main message?
Well, I can distill it to 2, common language.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So what are some of the common pitfalls or mistakes that people have to keep in mind as they try to embed or incorporate or implement what you teach them?
What are some of the things that people have to, keep in mind?
Oh, yeah. Common pitfalls or mistakes that might happen as they start to use what you taught them.
Yeah. Well, the biggest challenge, so I teach people how The premise is that if the way that you're working now is not producing the results that you want in terms of your productivity, then you have to change the way you work. And the way that everybody works is a collection of habits. And we all know that changing habits is hard. If you've ever tried to quit smoking or give up sugar or exercise more or any of those things, you know that changing habits is hard. And so you can learn something in a training, but it's really easy to slide back into your old habits after the training is over. So understanding how to change those habits is a really important component of long-term behavior change.
Okay. All right. So the other thing is I'm thinking too is that a lot of times, I just was in a class yesterday, and they teach you all these things. It looks good on paper, but then you go back and say, okay, now my situation is not quite the same as what I heard. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, my programs always come with follow-up support afterwards, so that's the way that I partner with my trainings. I believe that in order to really maximize your training results, we need to do some work on the front end, and then there's the training time, and then there's the work on the back end. And so they're really months-long engagements. I offer them, this is my service when you purchase my training, but it's really not just I come in, I deliver training, and I leave. I partner with you to make sure that we get that long-term behavior change.
Yeah, that's good, because usually it's a one-off with the training, it's one and done, and then you walk away, and then, okay, what am I doing now? You got to make sure it's going to stick somehow.
That's right.
Okay, so let's spend few moments about your backstory. Could you tell our listeners about you've been doing this for many, many years, but what defining moment occurred in your life to bring you to where you are today?
I hated my job and decided that I was probably not the best employee also, and that I wasn't really suited to traditional employment, and I would probably be much happier and much more successful as my own boss. And so I hated my job. I wanted me to be my own boss. So I took an inventory of my skills and said, do I have any skills that people would pay for? And luckily I had an MBA, so I felt like I had many skills that people would pay for. But the most unique I discovered was my experience in the productivity field. I had spent 10 years in the productivity field prior to starting my business. In fact, the job I hated was also in the productivity field. And so I thought, this is something that I know how to do that a lot of people struggle with. And so that was but hating the job was really the catalyst.
So how did you get your first client?
Yeah, it's a great question that other new and aspiring speakers and trainers ask me all the time. Networking is the way it all started. I went to every group and to every meeting in town, and most of those groups had a speaker. And so then I thought, well, I could speak, I could get to know all these people, and then I could do a little 10-minute, give them some tips. And so I went to all the groups and all the meetings and did all the speaking for free. And at the time I was marketing a one-on-one program. So the networking helped with that. And then after that, as I was speaking all over town, I started getting asked, well, how much do you charge to speak? Which was a great question for inspiring. I didn't even know actually that professional speaking was a thing. So that was exciting. And then I was delivering one-on-one trainings, and people started to say, well, can you train 4 of us or 10 of us or 12 of us? And so my business grew from there.
Okay.
Now, sadly, I don't have time to do one-on-one training anymore.
So you probably didn't get first client the first day you walked out of your job. So what was the length of time between when you resigned and you got your first client?
Yeah, luckily I was able to, I transferred my job into an independent contractor relationship.
Okay.
Where I worked with my boss essentially as my only client. And then we gradually scaled down. And as I scaled down with that person, I was able to scale up with other people, and it gave me freedom to start the networking. So I sort of I eased into it, but don't get me wrong, I lived on my credit cards for the first year at least.
Yeah, yeah, but at least that way you still have some continuity in there, because a lot of people try to do this. They go into it cold. They don't realize how big of an effort it is to land that first client and grow a business.
It's very challenging, and a lot of people also don't know anything about running a business, right? They don't know about bookkeeping and how to manage money and how to read a profit and loss statement and all that kind of stuff. So for sure, yeah.
Okay, so another question in kind of a similar vein, but could you share an experience you had maybe growing up that still influences how you approach business today?
Oh my goodness. That's a good one, Henry. I think that a lesson I learned, I'm not sure exactly when I learned it, but the lesson was to not take anything personally. Unless you absolutely know that it's definitely about you and you definitely did something wrong, then you should assume it's not you, because people have bad days and it probably has nothing to do with you. And so once I started to realize, it's that thing, when you're a kid, the universe revolves around you, right? And then when you get older, you realize, in fact, the universe does not revolve around you. But still, that lesson of, if that person was mean, or if that, if this experience happened or that experience happened, it probably wasn't about you. So you can just let it go. That helped a lot.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn. It takes a lot of discipline, because you immediately want to react.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt and just assume they're having a bad day unless I know differently.
Okay. All right. And now, what does success look like for Maura Thomas?
Success means being happy and doing, I wish I knew who said this so that I could credit them appropriately, but it's doing what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So in some ways, though, I feel like while I am passionate about productivity and I'm passionate about empowering people to achieve more of their significant results and live a life of choice rather than a life of reaction and distraction, I also feel like that's a message that we mislead kids with, telling them, oh, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, right? As soon as something that you enjoy as soon as your living depends on it, you're paying the bills and your mortgage depends on it, it's not fun anymore. Right? So, I mean, certainly there are aspects of my job that I love, but if I were independently wealthy, I think I would probably do a lot less of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it's probably a roller coaster, because I've been through that. It's feast or famine, and if you're by yourself, either you're marketing or you're delivering, and it's kind of hard to balance those two.
Yeah, until you can get big enough. I've never really wanted to have a whole bunch of employees. I've never wanted to grow that much of a business. But once you can get to the point of sort of predictable success, predictable income, then I think it gets a little bit easier for sure.
Okay, so that kind of leads into now with COVID-19. How has this impacted you and your business?
Well, I mean, prior to COVID-19, I got on a plane every week. So it has had a huge impact on my business. Luckily, I was able to pivot quickly to creating virtual delivery services that are about as good as they can be, the very next best thing to being in person. And so luckily, while my business has taken a hit, it hasn't taken as much of a hit as some people who say speak only at large industry conferences that have all been canceled.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I know, I mentioned Scott Carley before we started talking, and he was telling me, I guess they even were talking about TED Talks with holograms and trying to do that sort of, virtual type of presentation. But that seems that's too cutesy to me.
Yeah, I mean, we're all having to adjust to things. Prior to COVID-19, when I would get asked to do a virtual event or some sort of webinar, I always declined because I just didn't like it. But I had to figure out a way to do it that I did like it, and I worked that out. But that's kind of a good thing for me that came out of COVID, because I'll continue to do virtual delivery even when it's safe to travel again. Not always. I'm still going to enjoy getting on the plane and being live in person with people. But when I need to do virtual, I'll be able to do it.
So part of being live is you're able to interact with the audience. You can make eye contact. You can look around, see who's bored, who's distracted. How are you able to do that with the Brady Bunch on Zoom? Because you're not necessarily seeing everybody. The windows get so small, you really can't tell who you're talking to.
Well, and that's one of the ways that I have adapted. I've created an entire virtual studio, and I have a 43-inch television that so that I can see. Now, it's true. If I have 30 people, that's okay. Once it gets up to 40 and above, then you're right. There's still too many to see everyone. But you try your best to engage. One of the ways that I've adapted is breaking groups into smaller groups so that it can be more personal. And of course, this works with a training engagement. It might not work so well with a keynote address to 1,000 people.
So when you're doing training, are you also breaking them out into breakout rooms where they can go off and work something and then come back?
Absolutely. I love the feature of Zoom, the breakout rooms in Zoom. It's great.
Yeah. Well, usually when I've done this before, in person, they cluster around tables. I can just kind of wander around and just kind of watch what they're doing on a non-interference basis, and then jump in when they seem to be going off track. How are you able to do that with these breakout rooms virtually?
It's a feature where you, as the host, you can drop into any breakout room that you want at any time. And sometimes dropping in is disruptive. Sometimes they just continue talking, and you can just sort of overhear, listen in and add your 2 cents if you want to. But it's not as good as in person, certainly, but it's not too bad.
Okay. All right. So, so I guess when things shut down in March, how long did it take for you to pivot and convince your clients that you can still deliver?
Oh, I got home from my last trip on March 13th, and I delivered my first virtual presentation on March, I don't even know what it was, 20th or 19th or something. It was within about a week. Now, don't get me wrong, I've done, it's been 5 months in lockdown now, and I've done over 40 virtual presentations. And I'll tell you that the ones now are 1,000 times better than the ones that first started in that first week in March. But I had to make it happen right away. Yeah.
I imagine so. I mean, you get more and more comfortable. I mean, now you're talking to a camera. I mean, that's the hardest thing is even in this is, I tend to look at you, but then I should be looking straight at the camera, because when we view this, it's going to look weird with me looking off to the side.
Well, I think people understand.
Yeah. So what have you done to coach yourself to get more comfortable talking to a camera?
Well, that's the thing. Well, so I have my big screen that I'm even looking at you on right now, and I have my camera on top of the big screen. So So I'm looking at the screen, and it kind of looks like I'm looking at the camera. So that's how I get around it, so that I can see the people.
So hopefully we will return to business like it was before. So have you made any plans for transitioning back to the way you did? You mentioned somebody you're going to continue doing virtual, but what about moving back to in person?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as it's safe to travel, I know some of my colleagues are getting on planes now. I don't have any plans to get on a plane for a while yet. I mean, the science hasn't changed. The virus is still out there. It's still not safe to be enclosed with people for a long period of time. So I don't see me traveling anytime soon. I'm not booking any in-person engagements until after the first quarter of next year.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, still reserving the right to switch to virtual if we don't have treatments and vaccines. And
so are all your engagements domestic here within the continental United States, or do you go internationally too?
I go to Canada quite often. I go abroad once or probably once a year. I usually have an overseas client. Those aren't happening right now.
All right. So other than COVID-19, what are your top 3 business concerns that keep you up at night?
I can't honestly say that anything keeps me up at night. I sleep pretty well. I sleep pretty well. I've been in business 17 years now, so I feel very fortunate that I mean, anything could change at any time, but I've gotten beyond the real roller coaster where it's like there's no business and now there's lots of business and there's no business. So I've got pretty predictably covering at least my expenses, and then some months are better than others. But I think one of my biggest concerns about business is that is for companies not to recognize how important it is to continue to develop their people. But their people are their most expensive asset and their most unique competitive advantage. And so we need to allow them to really unleash their genius, manage their attention so that they can do the things that their company hired them for to begin with, which is their company hired them for their brain power, not for how many emails they can answer in a day.
Well, that's a productivity measure there.
Yeah, I mean, getting that message out is what's really important to me.
So what's your ideal client size? Are you looking at small companies, medium, large? Where's your sweet spot?
Yeah, the majority of my clients are somewhere in the 50 to 250 million in revenue. But having said that, I work with the Army, and I've worked with lots of large, some global pharmaceutical companies, and I work with a lot of different municipalities, some universities. But probably the critical mass of my clients falls in that 50 to 250 million in revenue.
All right. So now, if you had to start things all over again from scratch today after 17 years, what would you do different today, and what would you continue doing the same?
What would I do different? I think one of the things I would do differently is that I would join my industry association sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody in business, whatever your industry is, you're stronger with your community. And so I think I waited way too long to join my industry association. In my case, it's the National Speakers Association. So that's one thing I would definitely do differently. I would join right away. And I think if I had done that, I would have had the opportunity to get better advice and guidance and resources, and because it's really, I've wasted a lot of money on vendors and providers who just didn't produce what I had hoped. But I didn't know anything about hiring marketing people, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot out there now. The feeder fish are coming out because there's no business. I get all the time. I get LinkedIn requests for people. You can tell right away. As soon as you say yes, they're going to try to hit you up with a sales pitch and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I work with coaches. I can find you clients and all this type of stuff. Okay, well, Maura, we could just go on and on and on. We're running out of time, so I want to be conscious of your evening. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more?
Yeah, the best way is at my website, maurathomas.com. If you would like to assess if your listeners would like to assess their own attention management skills, they can take my attention management assessment and get the results that will tell them how to get started, step-by-step process for getting started, and they can do that at maurathomas.com/assessment.
Okay, wonderful. Well, this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed speaking with you tonight, and your great advice all about time management, attention management, and productivity. And I'm certain everybody will find it just as fascinating. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Henry. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Business Performance Podcast with your business coach, Henry Schneider. For more episodes and business strategies, please visit welcome.ppqc.net/blog. That's www.welcome.ppqc.net/blog. And remember to subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. Thank you.